Howdy, I'm Tony Nestor. Thanks for watching this video today. Well, this is a continuation of the Painted Desert, and you can see behind me lack of resources here. Not a lot. We got some of this black brush around here. There's Mormon tea, some rabbit brush I'm looking at behind the camera here, the occasional yucca, but not a tree for miles around. Again, like you've seen in the other videos I've done, Mojave Desert, some of the forthcoming ones you'll see on the Sonoran Desert, you've got to be self-contained out here. You got to bring your tarp, your fire starter, your shelter material, and also dress properly with the proper shelter right here. And water, of course, because you can look around here for miles and miles. There's nothing around here. Where I do my walkabouts at, when we go out without a sleeping bag, and we don't take a lot of gear at all. We take a knife, a blanket, cooking pot, handful of rice, clothes on our back, and that's about it. We do those courses in very resource-rich areas, usually in riparian zones, along creek beds and in the bottoms of canyons, near canyons, where there are already resources for fire, for building wickiups and shelter. There's caves and ledges for getting out of the elements if it does start to rain. And of course, water's not an issue because we're usually near a creek bed, or there's some tinajas, some water holes in the sandstone pockets. But one thing you can do out here, if you are in a barren area like this, is to build a coal bed to get through a cold night without a sleeping bag if you're lost and you don't have the gear with you. Back in 1988, 89, I used to guide 21-day desert survival trips up in Idaho, and we'd be out for a couple weeks at a time with not much at all. We had our wool blankets and ponchos and that kind of thing. But we would build coal beds every night. Coal beds are time-tested, used for thousands of years out west, and my guess is probably other regions of the world, used by the mountain men. And we used to use them religiously on our desert trips in the Great Basin Desert, very cold desert, and not a lot of resources. You get maybe an armload of wood, like you would out here, that'll burn for a couple of hours. So you dig a pit in the ground that's about a foot deep, about as wide as your torso, and from your shoulders to your knees. Build that up with firewood, with whatever you have in the area. Cook your meal, boil your water, do what you have to do. And you know, you're talking about maybe hour and a half, 2 hours of burning. You get about 8 inches of coals. Put the sand or the dirt over that, and your hand will tell you, your body will tell you if you've got enough dirt on there or you need to take a little bit off. Usually it's about 3 or 4 inches depending on the area. Sand really radiates heat a lot more so than dirt, so sand really can bake the ground and bake you after a while. You might need a little more protection over the coals. But that's about it. And as long as it doesn't rain out, that's going to smolder and keep going, keep you warm for 8 or 10 hours. I've woken up before with a layer of frost on top of me, on top of my wool blanket, and I didn't even know it till the sun came up. So coal beds are really nice. They're not going to work in environments like Canada and Maine and the Northwoods, or very damp environments, or environments where rain's an issue like the Northwest, or where the ground is frozen for much of the year, like in Canada and Alaska and the tundra and that kind of thing. But in the desert, in places like this, in places like Death Valley, where you don't have a lot of resources, you don't have a lot of firewood for an all-night fire. Maybe you got a few armloads and that is it. You can turn that into a good survival resource by making a coal bed in the ground, burning that, and covering it with the sand and dirt, and then piling some rocks or logs or whatever you have in the area, in the forest and that kind of thing. You'd use more of the logs, but out here you'd stack some sandstone rocks around. Maybe if you got a tarp, you can put it over that to radiate that heat and concentrate it in there. But coal bed's a good way to go. Out here, like our other desert regions, you definitely have to be prepared and bring that gear with you. I wanted to point out a couple things related to food procurement in an area like this. If you're going to try and live off the land in a region like this, obviously big game ain't going to cut it. You're not going to find a lot of big game out here except transitionally when they're passing through. So it'd be the small game, your kangaroo rats or K-rats, your rabbits, jackrabbits, cottontails, pack rats, that kind of thing. Maybe the occasional rock squirrel or chipmunk. But again, as I mentioned in the procuring food video, living off the land video before, you want to look for these islands of life And out here, you're going to find it with these clumps of vegetation. We've got a lot of vegetation here. I'm not talking about these individual bunches here, but if you look straight ahead, there's a nice patch right there that I was immediately drawn to when I started walking out here. And that's kangaroo rat habitat over there. You can walk around the base of those types of clumps of vegetation and find the holes and set your deadfalls in those regions. There's a couple more over here. Heck, you could just go out here on this landscape and you're going to find your critters, your pack rats, your rock squirrels out here along the rocks, and set your deadfalls in those regions and be living well. So I'd go out here, I'd set anywhere from 10 to 20 deadfalls, put those out, move them along, put some down in the canyons, some along these rock bases, some along the clumps of vegetation, bait them with something exotic from outside the area, some type of food not found where that critter lives at, and see what you get. But small game's going to be the answer out here. And look for those islands. Islands are life in the desert. That's where you're going to find your critters, either in the islands of vegetation or in the islands of rock piles or log piles and that kind of thing. That's where you'd set your deadfalls. Here's a nice little island of life here, and we've got a pack rat, an old pack rat burrow here, or I'm sorry, kangaroo rat. We mostly have K-rats in this area here. And so this would be the type of region where I'd set some deadfalls or look for some fresh dens, fresh burrows, set 3 or 4 deadfalls around these types of clumps. Deadfalls rule in the desert. Not going to be using snares too much out here. So here's another K-rat den. This is an old one. And we've got another one over here that's relatively fresh, or perhaps even occupied. I'm wondering if it is, because I'm seeing a lot of flies and insect life around this one. See some old tracks around the base as well. And again, we're looking at these clumps of vegetation. That's where you're going to find critters at. That's where you want to set your traps and deadfalls. And in the course of walking around here, just over the last 15 minutes or so, maybe an eighth of a mile, quarter mile, I've already come across about 14 of these K-rat dens. And so that's not bad. You know, if I were to set out a few dozen traps, I'd be eaten by morning. Get a couple extra, and those spare that I had, I'd jerk. It doesn't take long to make jerky here in the Southwest, about 6 to 8 hours on a good sunny day. And with these small critters, you just clean them out, skin them, wash them out, and then string them up. And with K-rats, chipmunks, pack rats, that kind of thing, you've got jerked meat in 6 to 8 hours. You leave the bones and ribs in, and then when you're ready to eat them a few days or a few weeks later, you just pound all that up with a rock and rehydrate it in your stew. So again, small critters out here, that's what's going to sustain you, using deadfalls. Well, thanks for watching this video. If you're interested in more information on our books or field courses here in Arizona, you can visit our website at apathways.com. In the meantime, enjoy the wilds.